All right, buckle up, everyone, because we're about to dig into something pretty cool today, and that is rhizomatic thinking.
Mhm.
And no, before you grab your gardening gloves, we're not talking about plants, though it does sound a bit like it, right? We're diving deep into how this fascinating concept can totally change how we approach UX research, something I'm super curious about personally.
Definitely fascinating.
So often when we think about user experience, we tend to think linearly, like users just moving smoothly from point A to point B, following a straight line.
Right. Click here, scroll there, boom, purchase complete.
Exactly. But is it really that simple?
Well, and that's the thing. As logical as that sounds, it's often way too simplistic. The source material even calls this out, referring to it as arborescent thinking. Basically, it's like picturing knowledge and structures like a tree, roots, branches, very fixed, very predictable.
Yeah, I get that.
But we all know that user journeys, well, they're rarely ever that straightforward. Think about it. Have you ever gone down a rabbit hole on the internet?
Oh, all the time. Happens to the best of us.
Exactly. So how do we capture that more accurately, that messy reality?
Right, because our real digital experiences are way more unpredictable.
And that's where the rhizome comes in.
Yes.
So instead of that rigid tree image, picture this, a patch of grass. The roots spread out everywhere, right? Interconnected, no real beginning or end.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
That image, that's a way better way to think about how users actually move through the digital world.
So how does this rhizomatic approach actually work in UX research? Like, what's the alternative to just tracing those linear paths we were talking about?
Okay, so think of it this way. With a rhizome, you can't just draw a line from A to B and call it a day. You've got to consider the entire web of connections, all the different entry points, all the different exit points, all those twists and turns users take through a website or app.
So instead of just looking at whether someone clicked the Buy Now button, we should be asking.
Exactly. We should be asking what brought them to this specific point? What influenced their choices along the way? We need to go deeper.
And that's something traditional UX research, with its focus on those linear paths, might miss.
Often does. It often misses those crucial nuances. Imagine you were testing an e-commerce app, right?
Sure.
A traditional approach would just focus on the clicks, how many clicks to purchase.
Okay.
But a rhizomatic approach, that would dig deeper. Like, what's the user's mindset?
I see, yeah.
What are their past experiences with online shopping? What's their social context?
Because all of those things play a part, right?
Absolutely. All these factors, they're influencing the journey, often in ways we don't even realize.
It's almost like, when you try to understand a city by only looking at one bus route, you get a feel for how certain things are connected, but you're missing the bigger picture. All those side streets, the shortcuts people take, the unexpected places they end up.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And that's what makes rhizomatic thinking so exciting, really.
Yeah.
It's not just about recognizing that user journeys are complex. It's about bringing that complexity into how we design.
And it's interesting. That actually links up perfectly with how we already approach UX design, doesn't it? Always iterating, always adapting, always responding to what we learn from users.
Absolutely. It's like a perfect match. In fact, the source material actually talks about how even systems that seem rigid, like language, can have rhizomatic qualities.
Yeah.
They use this term generative trees.
Okay, now you're going to have to break that down for me. Generative trees, what are those? And what do they have to do with UX?
All right, so think about language this way, right? It has rules, it has structure, but it's constantly changing. New words pop up, meaning shift. Slang becomes a thing.
Right, it's always evolving.
Exactly. And in the same way, users will often find these unexpected ways to use our products, revealing possibilities that we never even thought of.
So it's about being ready for those unexpected uses, those moments when users kind of like veer off the beaten path and discover something totally new.
Exactly. Designing for adaptability, for those moments of emergence. Remember that anecdote from the source material about Kafka? Even the most rigid systems, like a bureaucracy, can produce these unexpected, almost absurd transformations.
It's like no matter how much we plan, how carefully we design something, those becoming beetle moments are bound to happen in UX, right?
Right.
Users will always find a way to surprise us.
And we have to be ready to embrace those surprises. That's what's so cool about a rhizomatic approach. Instead of seeing those moments as failures, you see them as opportunities for innovation. It's about designing systems that can adapt and change along with user needs, even needs that users themselves may not even realize they have yet.
So it's not just about understanding how users behave. It's about designing systems that can almost like behave with them.
Yeah.
Systems that are as dynamic and adaptable as the users themselves.
Exactly. It's a whole new way of looking at how users and the systems they use, how they interact. And here's where things get really cool. This whole idea of rhizomatic thinking is not just about UX. The source material even argues that it can be applied to understanding any complex system, really.
Wow, okay. So we could use this to understand how ideas spread on social media, how the financial markets work, even how cities grow.
Exactly. Think about social movements, for instance. We often try to understand them in this linear way, like this event caused this protest, which then led to this change.
Right, but it's never that simple.
Never. A rhizomatic approach would say there's no single starting point, no set path. It's more like this tangled web of individual stories, shared frustrations, and those unexpected connections that come up, and all of that combines to create a powerful force.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it applies to those chaotic financial markets too. A rhizomatic perspective could be a completely new way to understand those sudden ups and downs by looking at the bigger picture instead of just individual stocks or traders.
It's like we're always looking for those straight lines, those clear cause and effect relationships. But the real world just doesn't work that way most of the time.
Exactly. Which brings us to a super important point the source makes. We are obsessed with data.
We really are.
We want to measure everything, put numbers on everything, predict everything. But rhizomatic thinking, it challenges that whole data-driven mindset.
Because you can track every click, every page view, but that won't necessarily tell you why a user took a certain path or what they were actually looking for, right?
Exactly. And those are the insights, those are the golden nuggets a rhizomatic approach can uncover. It recognizes that while data is valuable, it doesn't tell the whole story. We
Cool.
also need that qualitative understanding, the emotions, the motivations, the social context, all the things that influence those clicks and page views.
It's about seeing the human behind the numbers.
Right, absolutely. And that actually reminds me of another important concept from the source. They call them planes of consistency.
Okay, planes of consistency. What exactly are those and how do they fit in?
So imagine this kind of invisible landscape, a terrain that shapes how we move even when we don't realize it. That's the plane of consistency. It's all those structures, the norms, the assumptions that influence how we behave.
So even though we're all navigating this digital world, our journeys aren't just about our own choices, are they? They're shaped by social expectations, cultural norms, even just the way technology is designed.
Precisely. A rhizomatic approach pushes us to think about those unseen forces. It's not just about understanding a single user, but the entire world that shapes their experiences. It's recognizing that user behavior isn't just about individual preference, but about how this complex web of social and technological forces influences us.
Fascinating stuff. So as we wrap up our deep dive into rhizomatic thinking, what are the key takeaways for someone in UX, or really anyone trying to make sense of complicated systems?
I'd say it's about shifting perspectives, moving away from linear models and towards a more holistic, interconnected view of how things work, embracing the complexity rather than trying to simplify everything.
And designing those systems that can adapt and grow with the unpredictable, beautifully messy realities of human behavior.
Exactly. It's understanding that sometimes the most valuable insights come not from the straight lines, but from those detours, those unexpected connections, those places where the rhizome, so to speak, leads us.
Love that. To all our listeners out there, next time you're working on a website, analyzing data, or even just trying to solve a tricky problem, remember the rhizome. Embrace the mess. Explore those unexpected paths. Who knows what you might find? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.